Hey guys, we are back for another session of the Lunch and Learn on the Phoenix RIA. We are also streaming on my Just for Flips YouTube channel as well. So if you're watching on the YouTube channel, please make comments. If you're watching on the Phoenix RIA Facebook, you can make comments. We got John McCants here today, and we are going to dive into foreclosures. Now, this is something that I have done for 20 some years. But I invited John on because he actually used to do a foreclosure bus tour down to the courthouse for years and years and years, and used to teach for a group that would just teach foreclosures. His specialty was foreclosure, so I figured I'd have him jump on so we could jump into this. So, John, where did you start when you were teaching your guys? Where did you? What was your first thing you started with?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I remember meeting you down there at the courthouse with a busload of people. It's kind of intimidating, and trying to get the people not to make cat calls or lock bids or use their phones or take pictures. I went to a real estate seminar a long time ago, and they said find motivated sellers. The key thing, was nothing down. The guys tried to sell us a class to do nothing down real estate. And I figured, how in the heck are you gonna do that? And I later learned that's find someone else's money usually, right?
Yeah.
And or seller
private money and gap funding. Exactly.
You got it. So for me, it was finding motivated sellers. And so the easiest place was, it seemed like bankruptcy, probate, foreclosure. Well, the one that was most organized and the simplest way to get a list and go out to people was the actual notice of trustee sale. It's sheriff sales in some areas where it goes through the court. So I started, Chris, by doing mail and hand delivering letters right to the doors. We'd send out what we called lumpy mail that had like extra gum in it. You need some extra help. It was cheesy stuff back when we did it.
And so just to make the envelope a little, like, it wasn't just a regular envelope. You're talking about just sticking something in there to make it stand out from the other pieces, huh?
Yep, we used the $100,000 bar, the little tiny ones from Halloween. We'd use extra gum, so it stood out. So they'd open it. We'd leave it. It wasn't Arizona; it was Washington, so it wouldn't melt. But we'd leave it at the door, and it had some impact. But it really was where I started, was finding people in foreclosure. They had to sell their house or right the ship real quickly.
Right. So there's motivation there because there's a timeline. So what you're really talking about is kind of the pre-foreclosure process of, okay, it's noticed. They have that time window, and that time window is going to be different from state to state. But there's going to be a notice of foreclosure sale. You get that notice of foreclosure sale, and you can mail it, you can cold call it, you can text it, you can door knock it, whatever version of that or marketing piece that you want to use to try to see if they'll sell to you.
Absolutely. And that's, there's like 4 or 5 different approaches. And over time, when we had, so let's just think about where we're at now, and you can guide me as we go through this next half hour or so. And I look forward to the next couple of days doing this with you, next few weeks. When we have times when there's a ton of people, like at one point during the crash, I don't know what the dates were here, but I started seeing it happen in July of 2007. We had houses on the market, and I could tell within 90 days, it's like things aren't selling. Well, within a year, we went from 50 a week to 500 notices, if you will. There was no way I could keep up. There was no way. We got a team, so it got goofy. So what I ended up doing, and we'll talk about the foreclosure timeline as we go through the next couple of days, but I went to the end of the timeline, which is where you and I met. You were down there at the auction catching, it's baseball. It's first base, second base, third base, and then boom, they come home. And they're in notice of pre-foreclosure all along the base path until they get down to home plate, where they're either going to save the day, bankrupt, delay it, or they're going to sell. And that's the actual foreclosure. So I went from 500 down to 15, 30, 40, 50, whatever it would be. And I started tracking the auctions and found that much more efficient because those houses were selling, and I didn't have to attract the homeowner or go to their house. The door knock on a house the day or two before foreclosure is totally different than the door knock 90 days out. 90 days out, you want to build a relationship.
Yeah,
The door
you got
knock
to
the
build.
day or two before is, are they hostile? Are they friendly? Is it
Yeah,
occupied? And do I want this house? And you just try to get in the door. And
yeah.
so,
So what
so when
he Jim
volume
said,
gets smaller, it's nice uh, to do pre-foreclosure and the auction. But when it gets too big, you have to have a real system to follow that many sales. Right now, we don't have that problem.
yeah. So to back up you guys, he said, and we're just going to use the Arizona process because most people are on our Facebook group are from Arizona, but each state's different. But like what he's talking about is when the notice of first comes out, it's a 90-day notice, and you gotta do the typical sales stuff. You need to contact them, you got to build rapport, try to create, if you understand, some stuff about like, hey, if it actually hits foreclosure, now you can't get a conventional loan for 7 years, you can't get an FHA loan for 2 years. Having a little bit of knowledge about that to share with the person going through foreclosure, but they still have a window of time of that 90 days. And what he just said, when you're door knocking them like 2 or 3 days before, now there's going to be some real motivation. It's like, let's solve the problem and um, and figure out if we can get this postponed or whatever we need to do to actually buy the house, so they don't end up with that foreclosure. Because if you get behind on payments and you sell it to John, for instance, your credit score is repaired in 6 to 9 months. If it actually hits the step and you have a foreclosure on your credit report, you don't get a conventional loan for 7 years. So that's a big deal. So
Yeah.
so anyway, that's yeah. So just clarifying that, and then now did you do trustee sales? And you've done them in obviously Arizona. Did you do them in Washington? That's a deed of trust state too, right?
Yeah, we were under the same 90 days that we are here. California
Okay.
is very much the same. Yeah. So it was
Yeah.
a deed of trust, non-judicial, no court action, just a legal process.
Yeah. So for those of you guys that don't understand it, there's mortgage states and there's states where there's a deed of trust state. The deed of trust state, like Arizona, Washington, California, Nevada, Colorado, Utah, kind of the rule of thumb is just west of the Mississippi.
Yep.
They're most deed of trust states. And the old mortgage states, when you actually do a foreclosure, you're going through the court system, not actually having a trustee sell your house like you are in a deed of trust state. So there's just a little background about you. So if you in the mortgage states, you go to the court system, and the problem with the mortgage states is there is generally a redemption period. So once actually you go through the court system, the owner can come back and reinstate it for some time frame. Could be as little as a week, could be as long as like I think Minnesota is like 11 months. So I think about buying a foreclosure and not being able to access it for 11 months. Like, why would you tie up your money for that long and then have them reinstate it or pay it off, 10 and a half months later? So
Yeah, and those are things you need to know, whatever state you're in. In Arizona, we know our rules, and it's what possession rights do the people have in the house. Whether they're a tenant or a homeowner. If it was a mortgage, yeah, these people can come back and redeem it. What are the chances they're going to do it? Not very good. But you can't do a lot with that house and transfer it because they do have that right, unless you buy that right from them. So
yeah,
it hasn't. It's not something that's occurred a lot because we don't see it a lot here.
yeah, because in a deed of trust state, as soon as the trustee sells the house is sold. There is no redemption period. So in a mortgage state, and it's usually not on the mortgage states, it's not usually the homeowner that's reinstating it or paying it off. It's usually another set of door knockers that are reaching out to the seller, going like, "Hey, I know you have this, you got foreclosed on, but you do have this redemption period, and we might buy your redemption period rights for a sum of money."
Mhm.
And so it's generally not the owner that's redeeming; it's actually another investor that's redeeming. Um, but like you said, if it were a week, you could probably wait it out. If it's 11 months, that's obviously a long time to have your money tied up. So
Yeah, and Chris, I've taught this around the country, through an educational system out there, and I get a contact with some of the people from some of those areas that have the redemption rights. And like you said, it's an investor. And so best bet for that investor that knows their stuff is to get an attorney to draw them up a little document. And I will buy the seller's redemption rights, go door knock and say, hey, you know what, there might be something left for you after this. Do you plan to keep the house? Get a pulse on the occupant or the owners and say, hey, if I'm the lucky one and I get this house, sign this form and I'll be over here showing you I got your house. But here's $2,500. And so I'd like to buy your rights to redeem it. Unless you plan to redeem it, I'll stay away. But otherwise, that's a process that some people have used, like you just said. It's an investor wants a house, wants to avoid that waiting time.
Yeah. So for you guys that all want to learn kind of quote pre-foreclosure, like we talked about, there's the notice date, so you can work that pre-foreclosure time at the beginning, build rapport, follow up weekly for that 90-day time frame. So divided by 7, there's call it 14 weeks, right? And then for you guys in the mortgage states, figure out the redemption period and track the sales that sold at the courthouse, and then you can try to contact the owner, get their redemption rights and give them a fee and redeem the property. So so there are 2 different avenues based on where you're living. I mean, obviously all 50 states have the ability during the notice to buy it before the actual foreclosure date, but then you have different avenues when you're depending on your deed of trust state or a mortgage state.
Yeah, it's a different story. It's a forced sale. The house is being sold as collateral. There's statutory laws that go along with it. Wherever we're investing, we just need to understand the rules of the game, and that's what you're talking about here. So
Yeah,
you just don't want to blindly go out and buy. You're buying a deed of trust. You're buying a mortgage. You're getting the house. Well, what if you're buying a second mortgage?
Oh
You're
yeah.
responsible
So
for the first. There's a lot we're going to go into over the next few lessons, but you really want to do abstract title, verify, when this person bought the house, is it a purchase money mortgage you're buying? Is it a home equity loan? And I've bought seconds. I'm sure you have too. And they're great deals, but I'm responsible for the first. And I've seen a lot of seconds when I buy the first, they get evaporated. If there's a little bit of money left over after the first, it goes to the next in line. But it's called lien theory. Whoever's, and the IRS, they stick around. Some of these people have a little IRS lien that lasts for 120 days or 4 months. Doesn't really bother me. We're buying the house anyway. It'll go away. It'll follow the person and it'll get removed from the property in 4 months. But you can always go to the local district IRS group and say, hey, I'd like to have this released. Would you release it? And sometimes they will. Sometimes they'll do it for very little, if anything. But it doesn't stop you. So you need to understand what you're buying as a debt instrument. The collateral is the house, and we focus on the house and the occupant. But you do need to do your due diligence with title, and you know that really well, Chris. So we want to make sure people understand that.
Yeah. So we kind of went through the pre-foreclosure process. So when we're actually talking about the actual auction date. So let's dig into that.
There you go.
Before we go into the lien theory, let's talk about the auction date. And so the state of Arizona, they have trustee sales Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. States like Texas have what's called Super Tuesday, where they only have auctions on the first Tuesday of the month. Same with Georgia. California's every day. Nevada's every day. Is Washington every day?
It's only on Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. unless it's a holiday, and then it goes to the next one.
The next Friday. All right. So
very interesting. It's all stacked.
So Washington's only on Friday. And then there's different laws on where and when they have to publish their opening bid. Like Phoenix, the trustee has to put out the opening bid by 9 a.m. the previous business day. In Texas, on their Super Tuesday, they usually put out all the opening bids on the last day of the month. So in Washington, what was the normal practice for putting out the opening bid?
Sometimes it never happened, and it would happen during the day on a Friday. But I think technically it's exactly like here. It has to happen the day before, so you have a chance. But who's going to stop a trustee from going from a specify a bid, or an estimated bid on the notice, like here's the debt, here's all the fees, this is what it's about to be, and not having a bid that morning on a Friday, and then later on in that day they say, hey, we're ready to go, here's our number. So you need to stick around the auction site. Sometimes it's changed, but we found sometimes they had till 5 o'clock in the day to do it, and if they did it, who's going to argue it? A seller probably not going to say, hey, you didn't notice correctly the day before the opening bid, but technically they're supposed to do it like you said here, the day before.
Yeah,
practically they don't always do that.
Yeah, but so there's no real person monitoring trustee sales and policing it. So if the trustee doesn't put it out at 9 a.m. by the statute, there's nobody like checking out if they put it out at 3 p.m. the next day, that day, or the first thing in the morning, or like you said, they're just. I mean, I've been at enough trustee sales like there was no opening bid, and hey, 1 through 3 Main Street's going to auction, and and it's auctioning right now. And guess what? I don't have a title report on it. I don't have a lien position on it. Now, there's some tricks that you can figure out the lien position just by looking at the date they bought the house, the day it recorded. But there was plenty of times where a house was going to auction. It had no opening bid. I had no drive report. I had no title report. But I was in the business enough to still bid on it. I wouldn't suggest if you're ever going down to the trustee sale that you take that route. I just had bought enough that I was willing to take some of those risks. But yeah, so once you have the opening bid, then the actual auction starts, right? The trustee says, hey, opening bid is 100,000. That's always, I think, kind of a fun thing is watching, the new guy come down and place the first bid because he's excited.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, yeah. You don't want to be the first person necessarily. You just want to wait around to the end. And that was my strategy. I don't know about you. And if there's a new person comes in, I'd step up closer to them and kind of, spike the bid a little bit. And they're going, whoa. And but for the most, or if it goes too fast, you put a load, add $1 to it, add $1, just to try to slow things down. But if they're experienced people like you and me, we have a number we're going to, or we're on the phone with an investor saying, hey, you know what, I said 125, but I'll go 129, and they'll push it. So most of the investors.
So if anybody's attended the trustee sales, most people don't. The people that are actually at the trustee sales generally aren't the principals. They are bid services. That are on you think they're talking to their wives? No, they're talking to the actual buyer.
Yeah.
So a lot of like Arizona's like nobody is actual buyer. So when you come down, if you're a new person at the trustee sales, just FYI, if it opens at 100,000, if you want to be the first person because you're excited and you're new, bid plus $1. Because if you go like 110, like, they're going to kind of know, they're going to know you're new. They're going to know that you probably haven't done this before at all. Because generally the first person goes plus $1 just to see if there's any other bidders there. Now,
yeah, you're checking a pulse, right? You're just getting a feel for who's on this thing. Here we have to qualify. You get a bid number. You know if someone's on a property or not, but are they going to bid? You don't know.
Yeah. So so to qualify to bid at the trustee sales in Arizona, you just need a cashier's check for $10,000 made out to yourself. Now, it is better to call the trustee, and some trustees want it made out to them, but most bidders just make it out to themselves so they can just sign the back of it and assign it over to the trustee that they're bidding on. But is Washington pay in full right at trustee sales state?
100% of what you want to pay for the house, you bid, you tender a check for that. And if it's more, you get it back within 2 weeks. But yeah. You get, if you bid 150 and your check was 160, they send you a deed back from one department, trustees deed, and then they send you a $10,000 difference back from another department, whoever does that type of work. But it's 100% of what we paid. It's a little different than here, where you start with 10,000, and then it's the next business day by 5, right?
Yeah. So today in Arizona, you get a $10,000 check made out to yourself. You make your bid. You tender your $10,000 check, And then you have till 5 p.m. the next business day to come up with the balance of the money.
Yep.
Nevada, Washington,
California.
Colorado, Texas, California, you have to tender the full amount. Now, how do you have, if you bid 132, what John was just saying, if you bid 132, how do you have 132,000? You can't, if you have a cashier's checks. Well, that's what he's saying is sometimes you'll have, like, I used to go to the trustee sale in Nevada with $1 million. So I would stack like $600,000 checks in an envelope. And then I would have, call it 450s. So like increments of cash. So that's 800,000. Then I'd have maybe like 520s, and then maybe 710s, and then 6 5s, and so if it's 132,000, I could pull out 100,000. I could pull out a 20. I could pull out a 10, and I could pull out a 5. Now I just tendered them 135,000, and they owe me $3,000 back.
Yep.
Which you
allocation of money at a trustee sale where it's 100% of what you bid is challenging. I would go with $1.1 million. Typically, I had lines of credit on home equity loans, and I had an investor too. We could get more money, but boy, if you got lucky on the day and you spent some of your money, you need to make sure which houses you were on and which ones were hot. You had A properties and B properties, and you don't want to spend your money earlier in the day on something that's like, oh man, the good one came along later and I'm out of dough. I got to borrow money from, hard money or something. So allocation of funds where you have to do that is different than here where you can, $10,000, no big deal. You just now you got 24 hours to come up with the balance.
Yeah.
You're not worried
that's probably why the trustee sales at Arizona have been so competitive, because you need $10,000 to enter the bid. Like, that's it. And then you have until 5 p.m. the next business day to line up the hard money lender to try to wholesale the property. And when I started, it was only $1,000 cash. I started back in, 99. So you just needed $1,000 cash. You give the trustee $1,000 cash, and you got till 5 p.m. the next business day to get the rest of the funds. So you got time to set all that other stuff up. So.
Hey, let's talk about the other side of it, Chris. What happens here? And I'll tell you a little bit what happens in Washington. You did that. You bought a house. You got $10,000, and you realized later on that day you bought the wrong house, or you went out and saw that the house was like, oh crap, I hadn't seen this one for a while, and it was in bad shape. What's the story here?
So obviously here, when you're just tendering the $10,000, if you made some kind of mistake, you lose your $10,000. Where you like. And obviously, I've had situations in my, not just in my own trustee sale, because we always drove the trustee sales the morning of. If it was going to auction that day, we want to see it that day. But as a hard money lender, I definitely had somebody that drove it 2 days ago and didn't take the time to drive it the day of the auction. It actually burnt down the night before. So when he went to bid on it, he won the bid. The other guys drove it that morning, and so he obviously didn't know it was burnt. And then he came to me for a hard money loan, and I'm like, I drove this house this morning because I was bidding on it too, and it's burnt down.
Yeah, I heard a story of someone up in Glendale that was watching the news one day or one night, and he goes, "Hell, that's the property we just bought today." And that was at a time where it was $1,000. So they walked. Well, I think then they had legal reason that they'd be okay, because I would imagine that the trustee would and the beneficiary would give you back your money. It's hard to say, right?
I haven't heard a whole lot of people getting their money back at a trustee sale. In my experience, the only time you get your money back at a trustee sale is if there's a bankruptcy and the trustee doesn't know about it, and then that unwinds the sale. And we'll jump into that, but let's on the next we're going to be like 3 or 4 episodes, because like to cover it all, it's not going to all fit in like we're going to keep this at 30 minutes. It's not going to fit in a 30-minute window, but yeah, we'll and when you in your experience in Washington, when you pay at the sale, like, it's done. So like if you didn't drive it and the condition is worse, or
It's buyer beware. You just, yeah, I know a guy named Shane. He was an auction rep, and he realized after he bought a house, he hadn't given the check to the trustee. He won the bid, So we'll just talk about this because sometimes people make mistakes. And Shane realized, someone said, Shane, that's a second you just bought. He goes, no way. He made a phone call, and he just slowly walked around the building and left. He hadn't hadn't tendered the check yet and done the receipt. Sometimes they'll do 2 or 3 sales before they will write up the receipt. Now they don't. They do them right afterwards, but they used to do it kind of a little bit sloppy. And so what could happen there is potentially the lender could come back saying, hey, we have loss here because we're not going to sell it for what we sold it to you for, dude. So we're coming after you for deficiency or whatever. But Shane's only remedy was to run. And he's like, where did he go?
I don't know. Yeah, 100%. Like if you don't pay for, if you choose not to pay for the trustee sale, it's basically like a contract. And there is liability there because trust me, I've had a couple lawsuits. I've been sued for not performing on a trustee sale. It was more about kind of like a little turf war in the beginning, way back when. Not that I know of any of it happening now, but there were just a couple big companies that were at the trustee sales. So you hear these stories about these people that would bid you up and all that stuff. That was 100% true back in the day. It's not as it doesn't happen as much right now just because data's out there. We had our secret list. Nobody else had our list. Nobody else knew. That everybody'd be like down the trustee sale, like, how do they know these houses are coming up? Well, we kept databases of those notices. Like now everybody you can subscribe to like foreclosure radar for $100 and have all the data.
Yeah. Well, we've covered the auction pretty well. We'll touch on it more. I just want to throw something out to you. I talk to a lot of people, as you do, and say, it's not for me. I'm not going to do trustee sale, or I'm not going to whatever. I think it's wise to go down and find out how the sale concludes wherever you live and wherever you play ball. Just imagine you're in contract with someone that's in foreclosure. You knock on the door, and now it's crashing at the steps. You need to know how this thing plays out. So you might not be a foreclosure auction player or bidder, but what if you're the one that is in contract and you've got the house secured but you can't stop it and you can't for some reason perform in the time that you got to. You have more information on that house than anybody probably. You've been in it, whether the people are good, bad, or indifferent. So if you're an investor that's just looking to get in the game and don't want to be an auction guy, knowing how this plays out really is important in those rare situations that you might find your house that you're in contract with going down to the sale. And I've seen it happen, and you just need to know how to defend yourself and, call off the wolves, if you will, and postpone the dang thing and get it to happen is what you'd want to do.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to try to keep this one at 30 minutes. We're going to do this for like the next 3 or 4 weeks, but just a little recap. There's a trustee sale notice. Washington, it's 90 days. Arizona, it's 90 days. Other deed of trust states have a certain time frame that they notice the house before the date. So in that time frame, you can try to run a pre-foreclosure business. When we actually get to the auction date, you need to go down to bid. If it's pay in full, you need to have all the money ready to go. If you're Arizona, you can have a $10,000 deposit. You need to drive the property. And honestly, maybe we just take a camera crew and go spend a day driving properties. That would be fun too. I haven't done that in years.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So you need to drive the property, and then it comes to the opening bid. Generally, it's published the opening bid the day before, and then you actually go to the auction. And what John was saying is like, hey, even if you're going to work a pre-foreclosure business, which is a very lucrative business, also understand the auction process. So, because you've been in the house, you've had the house under the contract, you might even have a buyer for the house. You're way ahead of everybody else that's just at the auction. So just understand the auction process, because that might help get another deal across the board.
Yep. And if you're the successful bidder, you got to get out there and secure your home and find out who's in it if anybody's in it, possession rights and all the good things. That's exciting. At the same time, you need to know your business. You need to know the take back laws and possession laws in your state.
Yeah.
And when you're in business, that's just part of being in business. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. That was episode 1. We're gonna keep going, and we talked about up to the kind of the opening bid in the auction, and let's get into like evaluating properties. We'll get into driving properties. We'll talk about after the auction, eviction processes, all that kind of stuff. If it's occupied, if it's vacant, and then we're going to do one episode on excess proceeds, which is even post auction, like what there's actually an entire business after the trustee sale. So anyway, John, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks,
and if you were watching live or if you're watching on a replay, there will be 3 or 4 more episodes of this. So stay tuned.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.
Yep. See you.